When Machiavelli observed the princes of Italy, the merchants of Florence, and the soldiers who roamed the streets hungry for power, he understood something the modern world still fails to grasp. Poverty itself is not the true enemy. The deeper, more dangerous threat is the poverty that begins inside the mind. The kind of poverty that makes a man believe he is smaller than the world, weaker than others, and undeserving of influence. Today, I will show you why the most ruthless rulers, even in their lowest moments, never allowed themselves to think they were poor, and why you must adopt the same discipline. The world does not strike you down because you possess too little. It strikes you when it senses you think too little of yourself. Every society, every workplace, every social circle, every hierarchy is built on the same instinct. Human beings judge value long before they see proof. A man who walks into a room with his shoulders lowered and his voice uncertain announces his inferiority before he even speaks. A man who carries the weight of self-doubt reveals his weakness before anyone tests him. This is why Machiavelli insisted that the first battlefield is not fought with swords, wealth, or armies. It is fought in your own mind with the thoughts you allow to shape you. To think you are poor is to declare that you are powerless. It is to surrender the inner territory that no enemy can conquer unless you hand it to them willingly. When you think you are poor, you stop negotiating boldly, you stop aiming high, you stop making moves that build leverage. You begin to shrink your ambitions to match your circumstances, instead of elevating your circumstances to match your ambitions. And the world, which is always eager to categorize and control you, uses your self-perception as permission to treat you like someone who deserves little. I have seen men with fortune lose everything because they believed they lacked worth. And I have seen men with nothing climb to heights others thought impossible simply because they never internalized their struggle as identity. Machiavelli studied this pattern among leaders and peasants alike. The man who sees himself as defeated invites defeat. The man who sees himself as poor accepts crumbs. The man who sees himself as powerless becomes easy to dominate. When you project scarcity, the world does not feel sympathy. It smells opportunity, an opportunity to benefit from your weakness, to impose authority over you, to make you invisible, replaceable, forgettable. You must understand a simple truth. People respond to your confidence far more than they respond to your reality. Wealth is not the number in your purse, it is the energy you bring into the world. A confident poor man is feared more than a wealthy man who trembles. A disciplined poor man commands more respect than a rich man who grovels. This is why Machiavelli wrote that a leader must appear strong even when fortune turns against him. Because perception is armor, and armor is what prevents your enemies from striking. If you walk like a desperate man, the world will treat you like one. If you speak as though you expect little, you will receive little. If your presence communicates that you feel unworthy, every ambitious person around you will rise above you. They will take what you hesitate to claim. They will dominate the space you fail to fill. And the tragic part is that none of this requires actual poverty. It only requires a mind that believes it is poor. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine a man with nothing in his pocket but carrying himself with certainty. He stands tall, he speaks deliberately, he makes eye contact that does not flinch. He negotiates as though he deserves the outcome he seeks. He walks into a room expecting to be heard, not dismissed. This man confuses people. They do not know whether he is wealthy or not, but they know he cannot be ignored. They know he possesses something valuable within himself, even if they cannot name it. So they treat him with caution. They treat him with interest. They treat him with respect. This is the Machiavellian advantage. When you refuse to think you are poor, the world becomes unsure of how to categorize you. And when the world is unsure, it becomes careful. In its caution, opportunities reveal themselves. Doors open. Allies approach. Strangers offer chances they would never offer to a man who looks defeated. Power, influence, trust, and resources always drift toward those who project stability. If you want power, you must behave like someone who expects power. If you want opportunity, you must speak like someone who deserves it. If you want respect, you must walk like someone who demands it without uttering a single word. Every great figure Machiavelli studied understood this. They guarded their self-perception as fiercely as they guarded their territory. They knew that a man who feels poor will always act small, and a man who acts small will always remain at the mercy of others. So even when you have nothing, never let your mind echo that truth. Never let your posture reflect your struggle. Never allow your identity to be shaped by your circumstances. Because the moment you start thinking you are poor, you become poor in the only place that truly matters, and the world begins to shape you according to that weakness instead of the strength. You were meant to project. Machiavelli observed something ruthless about human nature, something most people never admit but constantly act upon. People do not respond to your struggles. They respond to your strength. They do not reward your honesty about hardships. They reward your ability to stand firm despite them. In every court, every marketplace, every council chamber he studied, the pattern remained the same. The appearance of strength commands respect, while the display of need invites exploitation. And this truth does not change whether you are a prince, a merchant, or a common man fighting to carve out your place in the world. Imagine you walk into a room carrying all your worries, all your fears, all your financial burdens, all your exhaustion. You think people will look at you with compassion, but they won't. They may smile politely, but inside their minds, they are calculating your weaknesses. They are estimating how much pressure it would take for you to break. They are determining whether you are someone to follow or someone to step over. Even your friends do this, even your coworkers, even strangers who know nothing about you. Because humans are animals of instinct, and instinct responds to signals of dominance and signals of vulnerability. Machiavelli understood that the world is not cold by accident. It is cold because people are always looking for advantage. If they sense you need them, they reduce your value. If they sense you fear losing something, they use that fear against you. If they sense you are struggling, they assume you can be influenced, persuaded, or ignored entirely. This is why Machiavelli advised rulers to display control, even when chaos surrounded them. The moment others sense you are drowning, they do not jump in to save you. They step back to avoid being pulled down with you. When you present yourself as desperate, the world treats you as replaceable. When you appear needy, people distance themselves. When you reveal your struggles too openly, people mark you as someone who has already lost the internal war. They may pat your back, but they will never trust you with opportunity, responsibility, or power, because opportunity gravitates toward those who project certainty. Responsibility is given to those who appear composed, and power flows toward those who seem like they already possess a measure of control. Consider the great leaders Machiavelli admired. Many of them had moments where they had nothing, no armies, no allies, no resources, no guarantee of survival. Yet they never allowed anyone to see despair on their faces. They spoke with the same authority they held at the height of their power. They walked through their palace halls, or the ashes of their ruined kingdoms, with the same deliberate steps. They understood that while they could not immediately change their circumstances, they could control the perception of those circumstances. And perception shapes reality more quickly than truth. Now imagine a man who has lost his wealth but keeps his composure. People wonder how he remains calm. They ask themselves whether he knows something they don't. They question whether his downfall is temporary. They hesitate to disrespect him because he does not look defeated. That hesitation gives him breathing room. That breathing room gives him time, and time is the greatest ally of a strategist. Through appearance alone, he protects himself long enough to rebuild. On the other hand, imagine a man who has lost little, but behaves as though the world has ended. His expressions reveal panic. His tone reveals fear. His posture reveals helplessness. Even those who once admired him begin to dismiss him, not because he is incapable, but because he projects the image of someone who expects to be dominated. And when you expect domination, the world eagerly fulfills that expectation. Machiavelli believed that leaders must be actors, not in the sense of deception, but in the sense of mastering the energy they present to the world. Even when your mind is storming, your exterior must project calm. Even when your finances tremble, your presence must remain steady. Even when you are uncertain of your next move, your face must show confidence in your ability to navigate it. You are not lying. You are protecting yourself from the predatory instincts of others. People respect strength even when they cannot verify it. They respect certainty even when it is built on nothing but inner discipline. They respect presence even when fortune has temporarily abandoned you. And they look up to those who carry themselves as if loss is merely a passing chapter, not the final story. This is why the appearance of strength matters more than the reality of struggle. The world does not operate on truth. It operates on perception. You must understand that revealing your desperation will never elevate you. It will never attract help. It will never inspire others to support you. Instead, present yourself as composed even when your life is in pieces. Act as if you are in control, even when you are holding on by a thread. Not because you are pretending to be someone else, but because you refuse to let circumstances dictate the value others place upon you. When you show the world that you do not bend easily, people begin to rely on you. They begin to trust your judgment. They begin to treat you as someone whose presence carries weight. And from that weight, new opportunities emerge. When you walk with steadiness, people assume you are stable. When you speak with clarity, they assume you know the path forward. When you maintain your self-respect even in hardship, they conclude that you are someone worth aligning with. The appearance of strength is not vanity. It is strategy. It is survival. It is the armor that protects you from those who judge you before they know you, test you before they trust you, and measure your worth based on how you carry yourself long before they learn anything else about your life. When Machiavelli examined the rise and fall of the powerful, he discovered a truth that most people still refuse to accept. Wealth does not begin with riches. It begins with control. Control over your reactions, your impulses, your time, your discipline, and most importantly, your mind. A man who masters these forces is already wealthy in the eyes of the world, even if his pockets remain empty for now. And a man who lacks this mastery is already poor, no matter how much gold he holds in his hands. Because without control, wealth becomes a temporary visitor, one that arrives loudly but departs silently. Think for a moment about those who squander their opportunities. They blame bad luck, fate, misfortune, or the cruelty of society. But Machiavelli knew the real cause. They lost control long before they lost wealth. They allowed emotions to rule their decisions. They let fear dictate their actions. They let comfort weaken their discipline. They let jealousy, anger, or impatience sabotage the very opportunities that could have elevated them. And once a man loses control of himself, he becomes controllable by anyone who understands his weaknesses. The world respects those who demonstrate inner governance. A disciplined man frightens people more than a rich man does, because discipline is harder to break than gold. A disciplined man wakes when others sleep, stays silent when others complain, works when others hesitate, and endures when others collapse. This makes him unpredictable, unexploitable, and unstoppable. Machiavelli believed that such a man bends fortune itself to his will, because fortune favors those who are prepared and punishes those who wait for miracles. Control is power, and power attracts wealth. When you master your emotions, people trust your judgment. When you control your impulses, people rely on your decisions. When you discipline your habits, people see you as someone capable of holding responsibility. And responsibility is the seed from which all wealth grows. The man who cannot control himself is always working for the man who can. Imagine two men standing side by side. One has wealth but no discipline. The other has discipline but no wealth. The undisciplined wealthy man spends carelessly, speaks recklessly, and makes decisions out of pride, fear, or ego. Soon his fortune drains, his influence dissolves, and his life collapses. The disciplined poor man, however, uses control as his currency. He invests his time wisely, observes people carefully, studies his craft relentlessly, and acts with strategy instead of emotion. His progress may be slow, but it is steady. And slow, steady progress built on discipline will always outlast fast progress built on chaos. This is why Machiavelli taught rulers to be masters of themselves before mastering nations. A prince who cannot rule his own mind cannot rule a city. A man who is controlled by temptation cannot lead others. A man who lets anger cloud his judgment destroys alliances. A man who chases comfort remains weak, but a man who disciplines his thoughts becomes unbreakable. His strength is not dependent on wealth, status, or luxury. It comes from the fortress he builds inside himself, brick by brick, through daily choices that no one sees and no one praises. Control is the weapon that separates the powerful from the powerless. It is what allows you to stay calm while others panic, to think clearly while others react, to move intelligently while others stumble. This creates an advantage so great that those around you begin to feel it even before they can describe it. They sense your steadiness, they feel your presence, they trust your capacity to hold yourself together. And in a world built on instability, people will always gravitate toward the person who appears unshaken. You must understand that discipline is not glamorous. It is silent, lonely, and often thankless. But every act of control you practice places you above the masses. While they indulge in distractions, you sharpen your mind. While they drown in emotion, you refine your calm. While they speak impulsively, you measure your words. While they procrastinate, you move. These small victories accumulate into something greater than wealth. They create a reputation. And reputation is a currency far more valuable than gold, because people offer wealth to the man they trust. Machiavelli observed that fortune visits everyone, but only stays with those who are disciplined enough to use it wisely. Without control, opportunities slip through your fingers. With control, you can build an empire even out of nothing. Because true wealth is not money, it is the ability to influence outcomes, and influence is born from discipline. If you want to rise, you must master yourself before you try to master your circumstances. Do not let anger push you into decisions that cost you. Do not let fear prevent you from taking necessary risks. Do not let comfort seduce you into stagnation. Do not let impatience destroy what consistency could have built. The man who conquers himself has already conquered half the world, and the other half eventually bends to him because they cannot find weakness in his character. Control is what makes you trustworthy, respectable, and formidable. It turns chaos into strategy, setbacks into lessons, and struggle into advantage. And in a world that watches your every move, the man who controls himself commands more power than the man who commands an army, because armies can be defeated, but a disciplined mind cannot be overthrown. Machiavelli understood a truth that most people never uncover in their entire lives. The greatest prison is not built of stone, iron, or chains. It is the identity a man accepts for himself, and the most destructive identity of all is the belief that poverty defines who you are. A man may lose his possessions and still rise again, but once he accepts that being poor is part of his nature, part of his destiny, part of his character, he becomes weaker than the poorest beggar, because he gives up the only wealth that can never be taken from him, his sense of self. There is a difference between having nothing and being nothing. Many men confuse the two. They look at their empty pockets and assume their value is empty too. They see their current struggles and assume those struggles are permanent. They mistake their momentary circumstances for a lifelong curse. Machiavelli saw this mistake ruin thousands of lives across Italy. Once a man starts to believe he is poor in his soul, he stops reaching for anything beyond survival. He stops thinking big. He stops negotiating boldly. He stops pursuing opportunities that require courage. He stops carrying himself with dignity. He becomes small, not because the world forced him to be small, but because he shrank himself to fit the identity he accepted. And the world responds to that identity instantly. When people sense that you think of yourself as a poor man, they treat you like one. They judge you by the way you hold your head, the way you look at them, the way you speak about yourself. When you approach others with the energy of someone who expects rejection, they reject you. When you walk like someone undeserving, they agree. When you operate from a mindset of scarcity, the world gives you even less. This is why Machiavelli insisted that identity is more powerful than fate. Fate may deal you a harsh hand, but your identity dictates how you play it. Imagine a man who loses everything yet refuses to let it define him. His clothes may be worn, but his posture is steady. His pockets may be empty, but his eyes are focused. His circumstances may be broken, but his spirit is untouched. People look at him and cannot categorize him. They cannot decide whether he is a fallen king or a rising one. They cannot decide whether he has lost or is merely preparing to win again. This uncertainty commands respect, because humans fear what they cannot label, and a man who refuses to accept the identity of a poor man becomes unpredictable, uncontainable, unmeasurable. Identity shapes destiny long before opportunity appears. A man who believes he is worthy begins to act worthy. He speaks differently, he walks differently, he chooses differently, he invests his time differently. Even his silence carries weight. Machiavelli observed this in every powerful figure he studied. They were not born special. They simply refused to accept limiting identities. They may have been poor at birth, but they never let that settle into their bones. They acted like men who were meant for more, and eventually the world agreed with them. Now consider the opposite. A man who convinces himself he is poor begins to behave like someone who does not deserve abundance. If he sees a chance, he hesitates. If he receives praise, he doubts it. If he dreams of something greater, he dismisses his own dreams. He limits his choices to match his belief. He stays among people who reinforce his weakness. He avoids paths that require courage. And slowly, without realizing it, he creates a life that validates the identity he accepted. In the end, it was not poverty that defeated him. It was the belief that he belonged in poverty. Machiavelli warned that once a man accepts an identity, he defends it, even if it harms him. A man who thinks he is poor will protect that identity with excuses, fears, and limitations. He will say that others are lucky while he is cursed. He will say that wealth is not for people like him. He will say that the world is unfair, but secretly he is grateful because it gives him a reason to stay small. The identity becomes a shield he hides behind, and as long as he hides behind it, he will never grow into the man he could have been. Identity is chosen, not inherited. You can inherit poverty, but you do not have to inherit the mindset that comes with it. You can be born with nothing, but you do not have to die believing you were meant for nothing. This is why Machiavelli taught that rulers must carefully curate their persona, because the world treats you according to the role you play. If you want respect, play the role of someone who expects it. If you want opportunity, act like someone who belongs in rooms where opportunity exists. If you want power, present yourself like someone who is capable of holding it. When you refuse to accept the identity of a poor man, you create space for something greater to grow. You begin to see possibilities instead of limitations. You start to take actions that align with the future you want, not the past you escaped from. People start to treat you differently, not because your circumstances have changed, but because your presence has. And presence always transforms reality before reality transforms itself. The world bends to those who carry themselves with inner richness. The world opens for those who believe they deserve to step through its doors. Machiavelli understood that fortune is drawn to those who walk as if they already possess it, not because they are pretending, but because they refuse to allow external conditions to define their internal worth. You can lose everything and still remain powerful, as long as you never allow yourself to wear the identity of a poor man.